Hello, welcome back. This is the beginning of chapter 10. What I found in this chapter is that sometimes people get a little more comfortable with this because often in real life we've dealt with negative numbers, and that's essentially what we're doing here in chapter 10. And for the most part, if you've worked with it in your job, which some of you probably have, you'll probably grasp onto what we're doing a little bit faster than if you don't do that. There are a couple things that are a little bit tricky and I think can help you down the road, especially if you're planning to go down the route of like algebra classes and things like that. So I'd suggest you pay attention there when we get there. And let's just jump right into things. Here you see kind of a summary of what we're looking through. You'll find this might move a little bit faster than the previous chapter as well because of your familiarity with the topic, hopefully. But let's jump right into the first definition. This is an important word for you. Whole numbers and their opposites. Whole numbers and their opposites. Those are called integers. Now that's a word that an algebra teacher, if that's where you're going next year into the first pre-algebra class, they'll expect you to have probably a working knowledge of that. They'll probably use it in the context of their discussion and kind of expect you to know what they're talking about. With integers, this visual right here I think is the easiest way to show it. If you picture that number line, basically all of those tally marks there, the slashes, those are integers on the number line. Okay, anything that's not on the one of those slashes would not be an integer, such as the red right here. See where I'm coloring in red right here? Those numbers in between, those are not integers. Okay, so basically if there's any kind of decimal value, that's not an integer. So integers are like 1, 2, 3, or negative numbers, -1, -2, -3. But you could not say like -1/2, not an integer, okay? So that's an important word for us. Here it's written in set notation, showing you basically that the set of integers, it goes forever that way, all right? But notice there are no decimals, and it also goes forever that way, okay? 0, 1, 2, 3, and then -1, -2, -3. Those are integers, so you'll need to know what that is when it's referred to in the future. Okay, so integers, and that's what we're going to start with, is working with integers, which now includes those negative numbers that we haven't really worked with those very much yet. So this is something you probably already know, that if I go to the left of 0, those are my negative numbers, anything less than 0, and you've probably run across that at some point in something, hopefully not your bank account, but that certainly could happen. If you wrote a check bigger than the amount of money you have in your bank, you would have a negative balance, and that's not good. And then, as you know, what we've been working with are positive numbers, which are numbers to the right of 0. Okay, so that's kind of the background of where we're starting here, a knowledge of that. And then here's a word you're probably not familiar with. Okay, the blank blank of a number is the distance from 0. Okay, that's kind of the key phrase in this word I'm going to reveal. The distance from 0 on a number line. When we use this symbol right here, okay, you see the bars around the X? So that's what represents this thing I'm about to show you. And the blank is to be filled in with the phrase absolute value. Absolute value is the distance from 0 on a number line. This symbol right here, that's how we say it. So that would be read the absolute value of X. That's what those bars mean. So since we're talking about how far something is from 0, well, let's take a look. Here's 0. If I'm right here at -4, all right, let's say I'm sitting right here at -4, and I asked you, well, how many spaces is -4 from 0? You would say, well, it's 4 spaces. You wouldn't say it's -4 because that kind of implies that if I just said how many spaces are between -4 and 0, there are 4 spaces. It just happens to be to the left. So with that said, the second blank, the absolute value of any number is always positive. It's always a positive number. So it's really that simple. And the questions can look like this. The notation might look like this. Number 1 says, this is like a math operation. Now, it's probably new for you. It might be. This says the absolute value of -7. Okay, the absolute value of -7. Well, I'm over here. It's asking you how many spaces is that from 0. And it is 7 spaces. So the absolute value of -7 is 7. All right, the second question, 5 is over here. So if I asked you how far is that from 0, you would also say 5. Now here's where some people get mixed up. They want to say on number 2, they want to answer that -5. No, don't do that. That's called the opposite. And that's not what absolute value is. The absolute value is always a positive value. It's how far it is from 0. So on the third question there, 0 is 0 spaces from 0. And if you have a fraction or a decimal, it doesn't matter. Whatever inside that is a positive value. Please notice also, when I answered the question here, okay, when I answered the question, and all of these, notice that I don't have the absolute value bars because I did that. So it's like it's new math operation. You can think of it like that. Like if you said, here's what I'm getting at. If you said 3 plus 2, what's that equal? You would say 5. Notice that the plus sign is gone. Okay? So what I'm saying here is that when you take the absolute value, it's the absolute value bars are no longer in the answer because you've revealed that positive value. Okay, I've just had some people do that, and it's not really right if you keep the absolute value bars in there. You take them away, making them a positive value. Okay, well that's important as we move toward adding and subtracting negative numbers. We have to use that and apply it, and it's something you'll see maybe in a few minutes, if not this video, the next one probably. So we get to a question like this. What the first thing you have to be able to do is to add positive and negative numbers. Okay, so this question says -5 plus 3. So what that means is basically you start at -5. All right, now to go plus 3 means we want to move in a positive direction 3 spaces. So positive direction is to the right, and that would end up at -2. So -5 plus 3 is -2. Now, many of you are probably comfortable doing that, and that's valuable for you. That'll make your life a little bit easier. Adding positive and negative numbers is not too difficult if you've done it a little bit. Take a look at number 2. If I said -4 plus -3, that means you're going to move to the left 3 spaces. And if I move to the left 3 spaces, that would give me a total of -7. All right, so we want to get to where we can do this quickly in your head. If you're not able to do that in your head yet, we want to work that direction. All right, a couple more here. -4 plus 9, that means you start at -4, and you move to the right 9 spaces, and that would end up at 5. And then the last one there, if you add 0 to a negative number, it just keeps its value right there. So there's 3 and 4 in your notes. So let's summarize what we've talked about here. Talking about addition. All right, when I add real numbers, okay, or we'll think this at this point for integers. If you add a positive number plus a positive number, right, you're going to end up with, that would be an example of like, an example would be like 5 plus 3. What we're asking you here is, what is the sign? What would the sign be? Whoops, I'm sorry, I thought it popped up. If I added 5 plus 3, you would get a positive answer. So this particular question, a positive plus a positive is equal to a positive answer. If you add positives to positives, you get positives. What if I add negative numbers? And that would be 8 right there. What if I add negative numbers to negative numbers? All right, -5, you have 5 negatives. You add 3 more negatives. Think of it like debt. If you owe someone $5, you owe someone else $8. What's your total issue? Okay, what's the total change? You owe a total of $8. So if you add a negative plus a negative, you get a negative answer. Now here's the really weird one. If you add a positive number plus a negative number, okay, if I add -5 plus 2, okay, is that going to be positive or negative? Think about that. It's going to be negative. It's going to be -3. Okay, well what if I added a negative number like -4 plus +6? What's that going to be? That's going to be +2. Well, so how would you explain when you add a positive number plus a negative, you sometimes get positive, you sometimes get negative? What you're probably thinking, what most people think is, well, you take the larger sign. And I get what you're saying, and you can do that and get the right answer, but it's technically not right. Because on the first example here, -5 is not larger than 2. It's actually smaller. A negative number is always smaller than a positive, but the sign was negative. So maybe you're thinking you have more negatives or more positives. Well, that's one way to think about it, and again, you could get it right. But the correct answer is when adding a positive plus a negative, okay, you take the sign of the greater absolute value. Okay, the absolute value in the first question of -5 is greater than the absolute value of 2. Okay, so you make it a negative number. The absolute value in the second question of 6 is greater than the absolute value of that. That's the true math words. So the picky math teacher is going to want it said that way. So you take the sign with the greater absolute value, and then you actually end up subtracting the absolute values, and then you take its greater absolute value sign, is really what's going on there. Okay, I'm going to stop this video and pick up a part 2 on the next slide.